Hello, it's been a little while. Um, if you've been subscribed to this channel in January, February, you were probably aware of our Broken King's House project. Unfortunately, and we announced this on our blog and on our Facebook page, but not yet on YouTube. Although we probably survived as much, it's been shut down. And ultimately, this is our own fault. We had investor who was going to back us, but we got started before the first check ever came in, and by the time, well, we basically just ran out of money before we ever got a check. So it's our own fault for jumping the gun and starting before we had money in the bank. But Broken Kings as a company is still moving forward. I've had to turn it into mostly consultancy these days, doing work for some companies in town, simply because I need to recover the funds lost doing Broken King's House. But when I have the time, I am working on a few games, and today I'd like to talk to you about one of them, which is called Sky Expedition. And again, if you've been on our Facebook page, that's the place where I'm best about updating because it's quick and it's easy. But really, I should be doing these YouTube videos more, so hopefully you'll keep seeing these. So Sky Expedition is a game centered around exploration. And what we have here on screen is a Sky Expedition level in Tiled, which is a great application for quickly making levels. So the basic idea is that when you first start the game, you have an airship who flies around this area, and at first it doesn't really look like anything. This is basically akin to the fog of war in real-time strategy games. As you explore, you kind of get this sepia layer slowly revealed. It would look more like this, though. And as you're exploring, you reveal the sepia area. The kind of feel we're going for is, you're not really getting a detailed look at the world, but you're kind of building a map. And then at a certain point, you have the option to survey. So when you survey, all the squares around you get turned to sepia. So say my ship was right here. All this would become sepia. And the tile you're on gets revealed. And if you can imagine, I'm just going to do a few more. There. So you slowly get the sense of a map. And I'm just going to undo all that because this is actually the file we're working with. So you have the shroud layer, which is where you start, sepia layer, which is basically a playable map, and then the explored area. And what we're kind of going for is the idea that you're trying to traverse this world and explore the different areas. So we want the separate tiles to have interesting things happen on them, give the player a reason to explore this world. Right now the goal is to reach the end and to rescue your crew along the way. We're talking about a few other ideas that might make this exploration thing more interesting, but we're just playing around right now with getting it to feel good. The original plan for this game was a release in June, so we've actually been working on this since May. But Sean and myself, Sean's the same guy who did the art for Furious Tactics, both of us do contract work and are working on this game kind of on the side. And so obviously it's now August, we're about 2 months past our release date, and while the game is playable, it just doesn't have the feel we're going for just yet. So we've decided, instead of trying to rush it out the door, to spend the time to let it mature and become sort of closer to what it is we want it to be. And one of the things that we've been working on is making this whole distinction between the three layers look really good. And as you saw, when I was just erasing random tiles, it doesn't look terrible. It is neat to uncover the tile underneath and see things there you can't see here, which I think is one of the cool parts of the game. But as you can see, as it stands right now, if you just erase the tile, it looks very blocky. And that's actually originally how we were doing it in game. So I think I have a screenshot of that ready. Yeah, so here's an example of the game, and you can see this is a very early release, but using the same map, I believe. But you can see that it's quite blocky. There's no softness to the edges. And so that's one of the things I've been working on. Now we're using Cocos 2D for this. So on a technical side, this has actually been fairly challenging for two reasons. What I've ended up doing, I'll show you the early draft. It's actually, what else is it? Basically, I've taken the edges and faded them. And the challenge with this that we found is that, well, from a technical standpoint, Cocos 2D, the engine we're using, doesn't support this. The first challenge was that sprites do not actually support multiple colors on the vertices. They're one color or no color. So I had to create a separate class called CC Sprite Gradient. Pardon me, that just basically takes a direction and makes a corner or an edge, pardon me, alphaed out. So we get this nice little gradient going on here. The other challenge was that because we are using tiled, inside of Cocos 2D, it actually works quite well with tiled. It has a class called CCTMX tile layer, which subclasses CC Sprite batch node. And if you worked with Cocos 2D, you'll understand that basically it's what you would use for sprites otherwise. The challenge I encountered is that it turns out this subclass does not allow you to add your own children. You can only add children created by the map at runtime. If you look at these edges here, though, what I'm actually doing is creating a separate sprite and overlaying it over top with the alpha. So the challenge then becomes, where do I put this? So I had to actually modify the CCTMX tile layer in order to support adding extra sprites to it. Now the problem is there are actually technical reasons why Cocos 2D did that. It was using the position of the sprite on the texture atlas in order to properly remove it and so forth. And so if you add children to the TMX tile layer and then remove them later, it causes problems. It actually caused a crash, and I had to fix that. And obviously you can imagine if I were to go here and reveal this tile, I no longer need this edge. So that's where that was coming from. So I got that far, and then we encountered a new difficulty. So this is, I kind of lowered the edges just to kind of play around with different areas. And as you can see, even a small edge, it looks pretty good. Way better than it looked before when it was just blocky. But we end up with these corners here, because I was basically just checking, are you different? Oops. Are you different? If so, add a border here, and add a border here. But when you have a tile between those two, it's not adding anything to this corner. Now, in theory, what this means is I need to add these corner pieces, and I've actually completed that today. The difficulty, from a play perspective, is there could actually be up to 9 different pieces on the edge of this thing. 4 corners, 4 edges, and then like the actual tile itself. Luckily, I think it's actually possible to reach that case, but it does add a bit more of a performance, something we have to watch and make sure that it's not creating problems, basically. But we have the corners in now, so I'll show you a quick demonstration. So you can see again, I've turned it up a little bit. Here, I'm just going to zoom in. I've turned up the edge a little bit just to make it more interesting. And if I walk around and survey, we get these nice edges here, which is what we were going for. The challenge is, well, let's go to the corners again. You can see the corners look a lot better too. They're not perfect. I think possibly a little bit more tweaking may occur here, but it's a lot better than, you know, having a jagged edge here like we had before. Now the challenge that you can probably see is when we're surveying, everything fades, and unfortunately it's kind of causing a little bit of weirdness around the edges. So I need to make it only fade at the appropriate times. So if we observe, oops, meant to go just left, that's okay. If you observe when I move left, watch very carefully right here. See, that doesn't look so bad except for the fading afterwards. But you can end up with things like that. You see that fade in the center there. It doesn't look very good. And I'm not really sure because I've tried turning off the fade and I'll actually do that quickly. I've tried turning off the fade when you are moving between points, removing the edges, and it looks even worse, so I'll show you that quickly. But the problem basically is that somewhere in there, there's a place where it either needs to fade or not fade, and I'm not really satisfied with the way either looks. I think fading's better, and I think it's more the removal of fade that doesn't look good, but so if you watch when I move left now, oh, bad example. Alright, watch when I move left here. It really blocks out. Looks really gross. So I need to basically solve this problem. Now here's, of course, something that you never think of as a gamer. What we're actually going for here is not some fancy effect, not going for, crazy particles. Like these particles are actually incredibly easy to add compared to this. What we're actually trying to do is make it so you don't notice the edges. We're trying to make them invisible, basically. We want you to look at this and just think it looks right. The problem is you can either look at this and think it looks wrong, and you'll be incredibly aware of it, or you can look at it and not notice at all, and that's where we want to be. But that can take as much work, or more work as, again, fancy special effects, like these particle effects we have going on here. So that's kind of the state of this game so far. And I'll keep you guys posted on the progress. I'm not able to work on it every day. As I said, I'm doing contracting, so it's not going to be quite as frequent updates as they were on the weekends when we were doing Broken King's House in the past, but hopefully they'll remain interesting, and I'll try and get Sean in on some of these too. Until then, hope you guys are liking the look of this game soon, and that when it finally comes out, you guys enjoy it.